Case Western Reserve University's Institute for the Science of Origins proudly presents the Origins Science Scholars Program. The Institute advances the scientific understanding and application of origins and evolution of human and natural systems. The Origins Science Scholars Lectures are presented with the assistance of Case Western Reserve University's SIEGAL Lifelong Learning Program, College of Arts and Sciences, and MediaVision. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Mark Griswold of Case Western Reserve University with appointments in radiology, biomedical engineering, physics, electrical engineering, and computer science. Professor Griswold leads the Interactive Commons, which curates novel cross-functional collaborations and harnesses technology to gather, process, and visualize information to promote understanding and exchange across diverse fields. And tonight he'll tell us about one of his most exciting new tools and one of the most exciting new tools coming to us over the next few years. Professor Griswold.
I'm going to talk to you today about something that we're working on every day, but every day it still seems like science fiction to me. And it's this idea that suddenly we can put something on our head and we can see something that's completely digital in our world around us. And I thought I'd start today with some of the origin story of how we got involved in this. And it starts for me with this quote, which is one of my favorite ones from Grace Hopper, which is the most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it that way." And if you think about your world, if you think about what we do every day, there are very few things that you can think of that were always done that way. We wear different clothes than we did 100 years ago. Our language is even different than 100 years ago. We eat different food. But if you think back, one of the few things that we've only ever done one way is actually medicine. So this is the new health education campus that we're building in collaboration with Cleveland Clinic. This will open up in 2019. But one of the core things that's not going to be in this building is a cadaver lab. So this is that part of medicine that's always been done that way. You can go back and find really old paintings and drawings that almost predate what we call medicine. This is how we learned about the human body. And since the beginning, every medical student has done this. And so when I got the message a couple years ago, hey, you're going to be part of a team that's going to figure out a way to do this, to teach students anatomy without a cadaver, you can imagine that it was a pretty daunting task. You know, there's not much in our life where you have to change everything all at once. But the time is right for this. And it was actually, I think, a very smart decision. We know a lot more about the human body than we did a couple hundred years ago. We have great textbooks with just exquisite detail about the healthy human body and the many diseases as well. So my day job, I call it, is that I'm a professor of radiology, as Glenn said, and we have just exquisite capability to image the body right now. So with something like a computer tomography scan or a CAT scan, I can scan you from head to toe in about 4 seconds with 500 micron resolution. And this is what we're doing every day now. And so we have this exquisite view inside the body that we could take advantage of. And so when we got started on this project back in 2013, our first approach was kind of to take advantage of all the conventional things that you could imagine doing. So we had experiments where we were trying to replicate the experience of being in a cadaver lab on a large touch screen. And you can see some of the students using this here. And we got some pretty good results from this. You could see that the students were learning, but it was different. They didn't have a full understanding of the 3D body. And in particular, when you think about going up into the brain, this is an image that shows the 3D neural pathways in the brain. So this is the white matter fiber tracks in the brain. You can see that these are really complex shapes. And even though we're spinning this around, I would argue that even all of us in the room, and I've been doing this part for 15 years, I didn't fully grasp the shape of this thing because I'm still seeing it on a 2D screen. So this experience that we had made on this large touch screen just wasn't good enough. So fast forward to the late part of 2014, and Toby Cosgrove, who's the president of the Cleveland Clinic, is on a vacation with Craig Mundy, who at the time is the head of Microsoft Research. He's from Cleveland. They've known each other for a while. And Toby was telling Craig this story. And Craig said, why don't you come to Microsoft and see what we've got? I can't tell you. So they went, they came back, and then the next week I got a phone call from Barbara Snyder, the president at Case Western, and Pam Davis, the dean of the medical school. And they said, Mark, I need you on a plane to Redmond. I need you to go see Microsoft. And if you think back to Microsoft in 2014, I don't think that even they would have called themselves necessarily an innovative company. They were this old company, big. Everybody thought Apple was the big place to go to get innovative stuff, or Google. And so I have to be honest, when I got this phone call, I kind of dreaded it, and I thought that I was going to go see something like this. But what I ended up seeing is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the night, and it's probably the most revolutionary piece of technology that I've seen for probably 25 years since I saw an MRI scanner for the first time. So this is called the HoloLens. It's a completely self-contained computer that you wear on your head. And if you look at the front of it, it has a set of transparent displays that do holographic projection onto your retinas to display holograms in and around your world. So this is a complicated piece of technology. I have them here on stage. We're going to try them on in a minute. But unlike virtual reality, if you've heard about this, virtual reality has a set of closed-off screens that make it so that you can't see anything in the rest of the world. With HoloLens, they're transparent. It's just about the same as wearing eyeglasses. So you can see out into the world. And it has a set of 7 sensors that are constantly mapping the environment so it knows where it is. So it knows where the hologram should appear in your world. And you put these different pieces of technology together with this exquisite awareness of the room around it. And you get things like this, where you can see a globe in front of you, walk around it and interact with it. You could put a large screen TV on your refrigerator if you want, or on the wall next to it. This is an example where they have a weather station on the kitchen counter. This looks like science fiction. And I have to tell you that when I saw this the first time, when they showed me a video, that's what I thought too. I thought, you're joking. And so I'm going to do a demonstration in a few minutes with one person from the audience, and we'll get some feeling of it. But I have to be honest, in particular for those people who are watching on television, communicating this experience is really difficult. It's something that you have to experience. And so this, to demonstrate this, I want to show you my favorite email that I've ever gotten. So I saw HoloLens December 17th, 2015. This is Jeff Dirk, 2014, December 17th, 2014. Jeff Dirk, who's the dean of our School of Engineering, saw it on April 1st, 2015. It was announced in January of 2015. I must have told him 10, 15, 20 times what he was going to see when he was going to go visit. And he's a very technologically savvy person. He knows what he was getting into. This is the email that I got in the morning on April 2nd, the day after his visit. Again, my favorite email ever. Last night, I literally could not sleep. I kept saying that stuff is real, not videos, mock-ups, etc. It's real. My sense of when the future will happen has changed. The timeline has to be recalibrated, blown away. Truly, I maybe got an hour's sleep. That doesn't happen every day. So I'm going to try to communicate this, and we're going to try to communicate this here live on stage. It's actually the first time I've ever done it live, so we'll see how this goes. But I want to tell you just quickly about my first experience. So I was brought to this dark room. They put this prototype headset on me, and they snapped their fingers, and suddenly I was walking on Mars. I could walk through the room. I could bend down and look at these rocks like this gentleman was doing. And then when I could turn around, I could see that the Curiosity rover was there. So this is data from the Curiosity rover, and I have to be honest, I had every belief that I was standing there on Mars. And at that point, they said this was a piece of software that they were developing with JPL, so the Jet Propulsion Lab, the part of NASA that's driving the Curiosity rover around. And they said, this is software that we're going to use to drive this rover around on Mars, to do planning for how we're going to drive around. And if you can imagine, that's not a decision that anybody's going to do on their own. You're always going to have a group of people doing that. So they said, why don't we bring in another scientist, who for me was Victor, up there it says John, into the room. And so magic happened, and suddenly Victor was there. He looked exactly like this, kind of this golden person. But I could see exactly where he was standing. I could see that he was looking at me. We had eye contact with each other. And he could point at things on the surface of Mars. And I still remember one of the first things he said is, hey, why don't you come over here and look at this rock? It's about 15 feet away from me. And so I walked on the surface of Mars, 15 feet over, and Victor started teaching me about this rock. And we could look up at the Mount Sharp that was next to us. And I had just had every belief that I was in a classroom on Mars. I was actually in a basement in Redmond with this piece of technology on my head. But you could see immediately that this was a new way to teach somebody something. 90%, if not 95% of my job as a teacher is just to get students engaged. If they're listening and engaged, they can learn almost anything. Any kid can learn if they're paying attention and engaged. And so this was just unbelievably powerful. I don't believe that I'm ever going to go to a classroom on Mars in real life, but I know that I've been there. I still have that memory. And I want to point out that that looks really different than a classroom looks like today. Our classroom today is no different than this one that was 100 years ago. And part of the reason is that those students were being employed for a different kind of workforce than what we need today. We're imagining that this new technology is going to allow us to teach very differently. It's actually appropriate that we're here in a museum. That's actually the model that we use for how we set up our classrooms today. So we could have students standing up, walking around a model. We can take this model, separate it out. You can't do that with a cadaver. And then walk around each of these things individually. This is in our mind, the teaching of the future. Also, a cadaver is dead tissue. I actually care that my physician can treat living tissue. And so we can do things like animate the heart, for example. We can watch the blood flowing around. We can watch the valves opening and closing. And we think that this is going to bring a new level of teaching to those students who are going to be going through this program. So at this point, I thought we'd just take a break. Does anybody have any questions?
Are you worried at all that students who are taught on holograms will then have difficulty dealing with the squeamishness that comes with a real live patient?
We do think about that. I think that the way we're going to address this is this way. We think that we can teach anatomy, which is really just the structure of the body, faster this way, because we don't have to cut and move things around, and students don't have to go through the process of reassembling the body in their head, that we can teach them that content, structure, much faster. It might be up to 3 times faster. Then we've got all of this extra time that we can go and teach that exact thing that you're asking about. But I want to do it in a way where the context really matters. So a cadaver doesn't represent human tissue. It's not like going to an OR. It smells like formaldehyde. We don't use formaldehyde in an OR. If you want to really smell things, let's go to a real OR. Let's look at real blood. Let's look at a real heart that's beating. And I think that will be a much more powerful way for those students to learn what's actually relevant.
I'm a design engineer, so I looked at what you have there, and my sister did embryonic research on magnetoencephalography, MEG. So if you take your 2 slides, there's one with all the radially outward extending nerves in the brain, and then you put your hologram helmet around that, or hat around that. Okay, all those nodes are inside that strap, so just visualize putting a MEG sensor on top of every one of those nodes, and what engineers 10 years from now are going to be doing is thinking about what they're designing, making an image of it, hitting the save button, and going on to the next one. You thereby will have eliminated drafters.
Not quite. I will tell you that I experienced a prototype of something very similar to that back in January, and it's coming along. It's not perfect. There's a lot of noise in a real environment. But you're absolutely right that we have the ability to access signals in the brain that we're not taking advantage of right now. And I want to point out that you have a full computer on your head too, so that those don't have to go off to some other thing. It could just go directly right there.
So you're on the surface of Mars.
Yep.
But
I was.
You're also
I'm not anymore.
Right. But you're in a laboratory at Redmond.
Right.
With, I would presume, an even surface, but the surface of Mars is uneven. So when John has you move towards the rock, was there a sensation? I mean, what happens when you step on an even surface, but you're seeing an uneven surface?
Yeah, it's not exactly one-to-one, but I have to tell you that was such a visually compelling environment that I wasn't even thinking about that. I can tell you that you can bend down. So you can bend down and look under rocks. You can look around the corner and things. And so even though you're not necessarily feeling it on your feet, you have every belief that you're there.
I saw the demonstration done for the faculty at CWRU and down at Cleveland Clinic, where you all demonstrated this in a classroom setting. So my question is, can you use it in a large lecture hall, such as like this, in addition to your small labs in which you would have a limited number of students?
My answer is going to be yes, and I'm going to show you a video after we do the demonstration where we had about 40 students, 35 or 40 students in an environment. You're actually sitting in the same row as Professor Mike Martins, who's done a class with 35 students. 35. And at this point, we're working on ways to expand that out. Right now, it's just about getting the technology kind of out and maybe a little bit cheaper.
Thank you for joining us. You've been watching Dr. Mark Griswold discussing new 3D visualization tools and how they will revolutionize medical education. For more information on the Origins Science Scholars Program, please visit the Institute's website at origins.case.edu. In the next part of the talk, Dr. Griswold will demo the Microsoft augmented reality system HoloLens. Now, back to the talk.
Why don't we do a demo? So I would love to have 200 devices to bring over here, but unfortunately I can only fit 2 in my backpack today. So we are going to have Ashu come up. Ashu's never done this before. So we're going to try to show him his first run through HoloLens. I'm actually, Jeff, if you don't mind coming up and helping as well. This is Jeff Makar, who is our lead developer in the Interactive Commons, and he's done a lot of the work today. I have to switch over to the Q&A mic too, so I hope everybody can still hear me. So you're going to get this one. So we practiced putting this on earlier. Oops. All right. So Ashu, do you see the blue box now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Try to tighten it all the way. All right.
Okay, so we only have one mic, so I'm going to have to go back and forth with Ashu. But if you look over here, do you see a blue ball on the ground? All right.
Oh, no, I don't.
So now we see, and I have to make a note that the video on the screen is going to be about 3 seconds delayed from what we're seeing. So why don't you describe what we see?
I see the globe. There.
Yeah, so we can walk around this, right? So we're actually right over here in Cleveland, right? I can use my purple dot there to point at things.
Yeah, now it's not on Cleveland. Sorry. But there it is. Yeah, right there. There's a pin in it too.
Yep. So again, this story starts with the health education campus that we're building with Cleveland Clinic. So what I just brought up is actually directly from the architectural model of the building, and we can walk around this. Actually, why don't we walk around that way? It'll work a little bit better. So we can treat this just like a regular architectural model made out of paper and sticks and things, but this one's just made out of light. So we can do things a little bit differently, like stick our head inside, and we can see the atrium.
Oh, that's wicked. That's really wicked.
Do you see the trees in there?
Yeah, and then you can see how spacious it is too. All these open tables.
And do you see the stairways?
Oh, the stairways, yeah. It's, wow.
And how about this window in the top? Do you see this large window up here? This is actually going to be one of the more distinctive features of the building. Do you know how big this is?
I have no clue.
So that's actually the size of a football field. The entire Parthenon would fit inside.
Oh, wow.
But again, because this is digital, we can blow this up to real size. So should we jump inside?
Sure.
So now we're standing inside this building. And you can look up and you can see the window up there.
Oh, wow, that's grand.
Do you see the trees over there?
Yeah.
And you can see the tables that you were talking about, and you can see the people.
Oh, yeah, this is absolutely amazing.
And so from a technical side, we couldn't really do this in VR because if you notice, we don't have a cable attached to us. So I can walk across the stage here, and it looks just like I'm walking through the building. If you look over there, you can see the stairways over there.
This is a big building.
This is a really big building. The Parthenon would fit in here. All right, let's look at some other things. Let's bring this back down. Let's look at some anatomy that's going to show up right here. So now we have a human body and a skeleton standing next to us. I can bring in the cardiovascular system, for example, the muscular system. They're going to come in one after the other on the video. And just like the building, this is just made out of light. So I can do something like stick my head inside. Just a little bit.
That's awesome. The last time I did this, I was in a dead body.
All right, so this is a good look at the front side. Why don't you go look at the muscles of the back? So I want to ask the audience, did you notice what happened? Did you notice that he walked around? He was over there, and I asked him to walk over there, and he walked this way. And the reason that he did that is because we already have this belief that there's a guy here standing with us. Even though, how long have we been doing this now? 3 or 4 minutes?
Yeah, 3 or 4 minutes. Yep. But it's a great way because there's no pretending. You don't have to bother with that. It's just there.
And so we can point at this together. I can use my hands to point at things. I can use my dot, and I can do this anywhere on the planet right now. So I can do this in my living room. I'm doing it here on the stage at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. So let's bring in some different systems now. So now we've got the nervous system and the digestive system. And I really like the view. This is really kind of an X-ray view. If you look at this into the body so that you can see the context of everything that's there. You can see that the heart is about the same size as my fist, which is right. And you can stick your head inside and look at the valves. So you can see all the valves if you come around.
And I imagine if you animate this, you can see blood flow through it as well.
Exactly. That's just a little ways away. So now let's just focus in on the digestive system a little bit, and we can bring in labels for each of the organs.
Oh, that's awesome.
Do you see the pancreas?
Yes, I do.
Where?
Wait. Oh, no, I don't anymore. It's on the back.
Right. So the pancreas is best seen from the back side. Right. I'll notice again that he walked around. But this is something that's really difficult to do in a cadaver, because in a cadaver you'd be coming in from the front side. But here we can see very easily where the pancreas sits with respect to the stomach and the liver, the bile duct. You can see the appendix there. It's very small, but it causes a lot of problems. So we can use these labels to do quizzes or to add extra information. There's all kinds of things that we can do with this. So let's take a closer look at the brain. So now this is a map of those white matter fiber tracks that I showed before. And unfortunately, for everybody in the audience, it's just going to look like the same kind of movie. But do you see, for example, whether the yellow tract or the pink tract is on top or on the bottom of that red tract?
Okay, I should mention at this point, I am slightly colorblind.
Okay. That would be a problem.
But I see some yellow over here and some pink up top.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going on the top, right?
It's going on the top, yeah.
It's very easy to see here. It's difficult to see in a 2D screen. We can even bring in tumor, for example. So this is showing that it's intersecting this light blue tract, but not the dark blue or the dark green tract.
That would make it really easy to understand then the symptoms of what that tumor does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we can predict that this patient might have problems with vision or touch, but not with motion, for example.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
All right. So this was human brain. Let's take a look at some molecules now. So now we get a 3D view. This is a molecule of insulin. You can see that we can walk around it, get a very nice 3D view of this. And then we can even change the way that it's displayed, so to show temperature or the atomic view of this. So now we're seeing every atom in this molecule. And our hope is that we can work together in groups like this. We can look at these individual bonds and we can say, why don't we modify this a little bit to change the shape of this molecule, which should change its activity. So that's part of it. So let me ask some key questions at this point before we go to the last bit. What did I have to teach you in order to do this?
Nothing. Oh, no, you had to teach me to tighten this thing.
Right.
That was about it.
So I had to teach you how to put it on.
Yeah.
So can you imagine another piece of technology that is that easy to use? Like my phone is more difficult in my mind.
Yeah, no, this is highly intuitive. You don't really need to know anything to use this.
So let me ask some seemingly dumb questions, but if I wanted to look at the other side of the molecule, what would I do?
You could walk around, or if it's interactive, you could spin it.
Yeah, but what would you do right now?
I'd walk around.
Right. And I wouldn't have to teach you anything then, right?
No.
So we can walk around to see the other side. If I wanted to zoom in, what would I do?
Just go closer.
Right. So it's just like real life, which is kind of a dumb set of questions to ask, but think about every other piece of technology that you do. In my mind, there is nothing intuitive about this. This is a black glass surface that doesn't tell me anything that I should swipe left or right or anything like that. having something in full 3D in your environment means that I don't have to have some part of my brain occupied with figuring out how to work it. I can just go interact with this just like in real life. And as a teacher, again, that's going to help with engagement. It's going to help with my ability to do this with any student. It's going to, I think, make this available to anybody. So let's quickly just look at our last two little bits. So this was, we did human scale at the beginning, then we did molecular scale. Let's go to the galactic scale. So this is data from Chris Mijos showing a simulation of two spiral galaxies colliding with each other. So they make this very complex three-dimensional shape, and this one is probably the hardest to see on the screen. But what you can see is that these tails of stars have been kicked off. Some of them are going down into the floor. Some of them are going to go up up towards the ceiling. And in the middle, they're forming this elliptical galaxy. So again, a very complicated 3D shape, actually very easy to understand here. We'll watch this one more time. My favorite is to watch the stars from this one galaxy being sucked into the other. So I've probably seen this 500 times. I'm still not bored looking at it. All right, let's come just slightly closer to home now. So here's our solar system. So obviously not to scale, but we've got the Earth here. You can see that we're coming through summer right now because we've got light on the North Pole, but now it's equal, so that's September. Coming around to December. This is Mars over here. Let's see where we are. Jupiter, Saturn over there, Neptune floating out in the audience. Uranus is back in the screen. And if you look back there, it's going to be difficult for everybody to see. That's Pluto back there. We included Pluto. Just to be fair, we included Ceres 2 over here. So that's difficult to see. But now we have this 3D world that we can walk around in. We can understand things like the seasons easier. I think it's a great way to see our place in the world. Is this the way you thought it should look like?
I didn't even know what to think, and this is far better.
All right, so this is the end of our little demo. We thank Ashu and Jeff for doing this. We can take these off now. So we can do some more questions now.
I noticed that the holograms didn't have a lot of resolution, a lot of detail in them. Is there a way to increase that, or is that one of the system's limitations?
So I'm going to ask Ashu that, but what we were broadcasting up on the screen is a very low resolution version of what we were actually seeing. So Ashu, did you see any pixels or any issues when we were walking around?
No, I didn't see any issues. I thought it worked swimmingly.
Yeah, I can tell you it's about a factor of 2 away from what we would call like a retina display where you wouldn't be able to see any pixels at all. So again, we have kind of a limited bandwidth, so we can't show the whole resolution here. I'll go back to my favorite slide ever. It's really difficult to convey this until you experience it.
When you speak of science fiction coming true almost, do you think it's ever conceivable that we'll be able to reverse this process and see what the mind is thinking?
This is going to go a little bit off topic, but I'm going to try to keep it short. My day job is MRI, and there's a concept in there called functional MRI, where you're looking at blood flow patterns in the brain that we think are related to neuronal activity. There's a guy named Jack Gallant out in Berkeley who I'd ask you to go to YouTube and look up. He's done a study that everybody should see. It was all the way back in 2008, where he showed a series of volunteers a bunch of movie scenes and recorded what their brains were doing, and then took another set of patients or volunteers and showed them another set of movies, and then based on the data from the first set, tried to predict what the second set were seeing. And I can show you the video afterwards, but I would encourage everybody to go look up that video it's stunning what you can do now. So you're not going to do that with HoloLens, but with my other day job with MRI, you can.
The limitation on the system seems to be making the holograms in the first place. I can understand with the skeletal system where you could do holographic photography, but how do you create the hologram of the galaxy or the molecule?
Those two were actually pretty easy, that they're just computed. So those galaxies that I showed were from a simulation that Chris Mijos did. So those he had a total of 130,000 galaxies, or 130,000 stars that he tracked through those two galaxies doing that simulation. In the molecule, we just looked up a standard file format for molecular definitions, and we just render that in a pretty standard way. Both of those are pretty easy. In the rest of the body, we're using biomedical artists. So we have a team of, I think right now we're up to 5 biomedical artists, if I count right, for the summer. We have 3 on staff normally. And then in the long term, we're going to combine that with radiological images so that we're going to be able to do patient-specific kind of visualization.
We hope you've been enjoying the Origins Science Scholars Program with Dr. Mark Griswold. Dr. Griswold is one of the co-developers of MRI fingerprinting, a revolutionary new technique in magnetic resonance imaging. In the second part of our talk, we watched an audience member get introduced to augmented reality. In our final segment, Dr. Griswold will demonstrate how augmented reality is being used in classroom settings to enrich learning. Now, back to our talk.
I want to talk about just the future, and as I mentioned, this is a video I wanted to show of our first class that we did with this. So this was a class of 40 students. This was actually featured on CBS Sunday Morning. Is that better?
Go start the anatomy course app and click Join Session.
You all see that you have models in front of you. All of us on the outside without HoloLenses just see you guys walking around in a room. So can everybody go to the posterior side of your model? So 100% of you walked around him. You already believe that this guy's here. So let's take it to the next level.
I'm going to look with you at some of the musculoskeletal elements of the chest or the thoracic wall. If we look at the vertebral body and follow it posteriorly, you should see a small arch.
Partial ribs are sometimes called floating ribs because they don't go all the way around.
It's definitely easier to get the big picture right away because then you can see it all at once.
So already we're seeing that we're developing a sort of X-ray type of vision, which is really exciting, isn't it?
And I could come up from underneath and see like what the top of the diaphragm looks like compared to the bottom and what passes through where.
And we're going to focus now on the aorta. And you can see the aorta is a candy cane type structure.
In the aorta, we were in lab this week and we were trying to figure out how the aorta is positioned and where the branches come off. And here is just so easy to see because we could peel away everything else.
Now we've added on the vascular tree.
You even see the pulmonary arteries in the back, the branches.
Oh wow!
I thought it was amazing, all these minor details that you kind of miss in cadaver lab. But here you have everything that's laid out to you and its spatial relationships with all the skeletal structures too. It was phenomenal.
Because in the real cadaver, a lot of structures are kind of hidden, so you can't really see them or find them even. And here you can actually see the relationship between the structures and the really, really tiny structures especially. Those are really helpful.
I felt like it was actually a really good group dynamic that I wasn't expecting to be able to have with this.
And I could see everybody, and then it was really overlay and onto the reality, so that was really amazing.
I thought it'd be cool to see the HoloLens in action, but I didn't expect it to actually be as educational as it was. And I feel like I'm kind of pumped to go study and kind of solidify those details.
That, I hope, shows you a little bit better representation of some of the detail that we're able to see. And that statistic that is in the middle of that video is really important to me. These were students who have already passed their anatomy class. They've already been to the cadaver lab and passed. And we asked them just kind of an offhand question in the post-class survey, did you learn anything new today? And I thought maybe some of the students who were bad students may say yes or something. 85% of them said they learned something new. And that really tells me that we're onto something, that we can teach and do this in new ways. I want to for the rest of this, talk about some of the other ways that we're using this to teach outside of anatomy. And I'm going to show a video that Microsoft did this year. I'm going to just put a disclaimer that this is a Microsoft video on there, but it features the class that Mike Martins taught earlier in the year. And I think it's just a beautiful video that they did, so I wanted to play that too.
I was tired of preparing kids for yesterday. We were always preparing kids for this world that didn't really exist anymore and that wasn't going to exist when they graduated. And I wanted to get my kids to the point where they could actually build the future.
We've seen a fundamental shift already in how a lot of educational resources are being delivered. We've seen a shift from print books through to ebooks. And I think the next evolution of that is from books to mixed reality.
As I started preparing my lectures and thinking how I'm going to communicate this to the students, one thing I wished is I had a 3D chalkboard.
You actually have all these tools that allow students to generate content for other students, which means that you could have students that are subject matter experts informing the development of experiences to help teach content that they're learning about in their other classes. And that's just amazing.
With the HoloLens, our idea for an app was if you didn't have access to all different instruments, you could learn them. I feel like being able to interact with something is what makes you remember it more.
I'm a visual learner. I'm someone who learns by experience as opposed to just reading it out of a book. And so having the HoloLens put that visual in front of you makes things much easier.
We could use mixed reality for agriculture,
science classes,
geography.
Math would be a big one.
It provides a much more engaging experience for students, and that's the ultimate goal for a teacher, is to engage the students and have them learning.
I think that gives you an idea of the broad kind of educational platforms that we could build off this ability to see and interact with digital information in this way is really new. I think you could see how diverse it was in that video. So it's everything from music to physics to chemistry, math. There's really nothing that I think we're not going to do better in this kind of medium. If we think a little bit further into the future, you can imagine that surgeons are going to be using this in the OR, that they're going to be able to look inside you to see exactly what they're doing in full 3D. So that's going to, I think, make better patient care. This is a simulation, but nurses, you can imagine having this kind of information in a heads-up display around the patient so that they know better what's going on and what they can do to help the patient. Obviously, in our training environment, in our nursing school, this is going to be a big deal as well. This, again, allows you to see things in 3D in a completely new way. So things like neuroscience can benefit from looking at the 3D structure of neurons. We already looked at molecules. Again, I think we can get teams of people together to design better molecules. The students who are here in class will hopefully understand the shape of them better. And that's really just key to advancing our pharmaceutical industry and chemistry. Just a lot of things are going to benefit from that. In a more practical day-to-day life, we can have somebody, so this is a dad with his daughter. He's on a tablet, so he doesn't have a HoloLens on, but she's wearing a HoloLens, and he can look through her eyes into her 3D world and then draw holograms in her world. So he's able to help her change the trap on that drain. So you can imagine that kind of training happening all over the planet. We're actually using that as part of our anatomy curriculum. So we've taught anatomy virtually, just like the original demo that we did on Mars that I experienced. We're using this to teach anatomy so that our classroom can be truly global. There's actually 2 of these flying on the space station right now. So the guys up on the space station can play games, but they could also use the knowledge of our engineers down on the planet to help them fix things up on the space station. I think that's just really exciting. That's Scott Kelly for those of you who recognize him. We can use this for designing things in new ways. So you can imagine that if you're designing something that's large, like a motorcycle, it's really difficult and expensive to build those, first off. But it's also difficult to visualize. So if you imagine trying to find the right spot for the mirrors on a motorcycle or for a volume knob on a car, it's really difficult to design that on a computer screen because you don't really understand how big it is. People are good at this, but this is why Detroit still builds full-size car models. Well, I could build this in a hologram and know how big things are. I can sit on my virtual motorcycle and make sure, I want to put the mirrors exactly here, so that when I go to build this, I'm building it once. I'm building it right once. So that's a complete change in the way that we manufacture a lot of things in our world. I could also do this remotely too. So I could have a design team all over the world. And then we're looking at some applications in the art world. So this is Apollo the Python Slayer. This is the first sculpture you'll see across the street at the Cleveland Museum of Art. It's a 2,500-year-old Greek sculpture. And it's damaged somewhat from probably what it looked like 2,500 years ago. So we can do things like scan it. We can fix some of the dents. So there's a dent in his leg right here that got fixed. We can recolor him to the bronze that he probably was originally. And then we can drop him into a garden where he may have been. I have no idea if this is what the garden looked like. This is just a garden. But we can put students in that environment. And now imagine that we're doing that just like Ashu and I were walking around inside our new health education campus, which is going to be a building that will open in the future. Here we can walk around the past. So we could bring in some elements of Greek culture here. We can see what it looked like. And I think that at least in terms of learning history, again, the origins of things, I think that this will be very powerful, much more powerful than learning from a book, which is the way that I learned. I think this is that engagement that I was talking about from the beginning. And I want to just go through that a little bit. Again, this is the old classroom. It's actually not too different from the classroom that we have today. But I want to point out that those students were being raised for a very different world than the one we live in. So it was essentially training those people for the similar kind of environment that they were going to go into in the workforce. And I don't know about your workforce today, but I think that our workforce is changing very much towards collaboration, towards finding ways to work with people to make connections that aren't there. In an academic way, we could think about our departments right now in the university as being isolated dots. But my argument is that all of the new science like this is a combination of computer engineering, computer science, and medicine, just to name a few. The real interesting stuff that's happening in the future is actually the connections between these isolated groups. And then we make new science and then expand that network out from there. This is what we believe to be the future. And I'm happy to say that our university is supporting this. So Glenn mentioned that I'm the director of something called the Interactive Commons, and that's the fundamental belief that we're doing there, is trying to take technology like this and figure out ways that we can use it to bring people together who wouldn't normally be talking to each other, and then give them a language to communicate. So these visualization or holographic type displays can allow people to communicate who wouldn't normally be able to. So the Interactive Commons is a relatively new initiative. Those of you who are on campus will have noticed this extension that was built last year at the back of the Twing building. This is right next to the new Tincomville University Center. We're still a somewhat closed operation, but we hope to be opening up a little bit more soon. But that's where we are. And I hope that we can invite you to an event sometime soon. But with that, I just want to say this is, I think, trying to live our motto at the university, thinking beyond the possible. This was something that I might have dreamed would be possible during my lifetime, but never during my professional lifetime. I feel so unbelievably fortunate to be able to do this. And I'm really appreciate the chance to be able to share this with you. Thanks a lot.
We have had a history in education of particularly technology introduced without adequate assessment, without adequate incorporation into the systems we already have. Your color blindness or the idea that a visual learner, I mean, the opportunities to custom education, the ideas of incorporating this with dynamically changing images that, you know, you can imagine IBM Watson connected to this system, for example. So I guess the question I'm getting to is I can see some of the potential, but I think we have to build in to the state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art ways of evaluating it so we really know what we can do differently and not just be basing it on belief, being a believer.
We are big believers in this. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when we first started doing this project, even before we did HoloLens, just when we were doing that touchscreen table, our anatomy faculty had zero interest in it. When we got the HoloLens on campus, we invited a lot of people to come visit it. A lot of people were not interested because it just seemed like the new gadget. We spent an inordinate amount of time doing the studies that you're talking about, the early studies. Is this really working? Are people being engaged? And the answer was yes, and so now we've got everybody interested. Now people are starting to pay attention, and now we're doing those larger scale trials. So can we take 40 students into a classroom at once, and can they learn? Can they learn better than what they're doing now? Because if it's just the same, we're not going to change anything. So we think that we're going to do it better, and we're going to do it faster. We're spending probably the next year and a half doing a whole bunch of testing before we move into the new building. That's going to be the main focus when we go into 2018. That's what we've got to do. We've got to validate that this is as good or better than the conventional program where we don't go forward. I'm 100% confident that we're going to do that.
I'm curious about the remote aspects of this technology, and so I get that you load the image on each headset so everybody's seeing the same image, but is there any improvement in the communication technology that goes along with that that allows people to feel like they're in the same space as well?
This is something that I, again, have to say is something you have to experience. I didn't really talk about it because I didn't want to take the time during the demo, but when we were in the building together, you may have seen some clips that we add avatars to everybody's head. And I can go back to this view that we do with our anatomy class here. This is a nicer view than reality than what we do. But you get an idea of where this person is standing. And it's so intuitive that I can't really describe it. You see that somebody's standing to your right, so you don't get too close to them. You don't stand in front of them. And it's immediate that you make eye contact with people. And that was the thing that I remember from that first experience. I was just looking at a bunch of light over in the distance, and I made eye contact with it. And I nodded my head, and it was like, yeah.
You're not in the same place. You're in different rooms, different buildings, different cities.
You still have that. That's what I'm saying. I still have this eye contact with just a computer-rendered avatar, and I can, I can shake my head. I can nod my head. We talk about the fact that you can, you see that people are different heights, so you can kind of identify them. When I'm teaching anatomy in the class that we showed, if you notice, the students all got down on the floor and were looking at the diaphragm from below. Everybody does that, and this is a great thing to see when somebody's remote. You can see this head, this avatar laying down on the ground looking up. And so I know that somebody on the other side of the planet is laying down on the floor, and I just love that. Again, this is just the beginning of this. This kind of very abstract computer representation is just the beginning. There's, if you think about the movies, we have very accurate 3D scans of people's bodies. That's going to be associated to a person, and so when you see me in avatar form somewhere else, I'm going to be represented by my 3D scan. So you're going to see what I look like, and that interaction across distance is going to be even stronger. I'm just going to quickly add one point that the bandwidth that's required for that communication is really low. So I give the example that I've done this from a 747 over the Pacific back to Cleveland. And I'm not going to say that it worked great, but it did work. I could hear Jeff and Henry, two of our developers, in the room. I could see where they were standing relative to our anatomy models. It wasn't great, but it did kind of work. And so you can really see that this is going to work anywhere on the planet if I can do it from an airplane.
The Origin Science Scholars Lectures are presented by Case Western Reserve University's Institute for the Science of Origins, with the assistance of the SIEGAL Lifelong Learning Program, the College of Arts and Sciences, and MediaVision. For more information on the Origin Science Scholars Program, including a full video archive, please visit the Institute's website at origins.case.edu.